of the show, but they didn't want people to know that they were listening. And it's kind of strange how the mainstream looks at this genre. It just kills me. Kills me.
Yeah.
Kills me. So
it's very frustrating. And the problem is to find somebody who will have a dialogue with you without defending their belief in the first place. I mean, might as well go back to Greece and sign up Socrates because no one wants to do it.
Right. Well, there's also the fine balance, though. And the fine balance is sometimes you get into conversations with people with beliefs that are a little bit too strong and a little bit too steadfast, where you need to have sometimes, a healthy dose of skepticism thrown in.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
You said you have an echo.
Well, I'm getting one off my mic. I wanted to make sure you're not getting it.
No,
if you're not, I can tolerate it.
Okay, if you can tolerate it. The other night I was on a radio show on a Friday or Saturday night, a terrestrial program out of Nevada, and I had an echo on the phone. And I must have sounded like a spaced out dude from like some concert from Haight-Ashbury, because I could not I couldn't concentrate. I'm listening to the echo and I'm listening to myself, and I'm just, and I was there for 15 minutes dealing with that. And I hung up the phone and I just thought, you know what? A lot of people just thought that I was a real doofus. So,
well, for all the chopper pilots that are out there listening to me, they've got a complex, vibratory, unbelievable environment to focus within, and those are my brothers. So it's not going to disrupt me at all.
All right, cool. Let's do this. Let's take a. I've heard you do this before, and you do this in such it's elegant how you do this. So I'm going to hand the stage to you for 5-10 minutes. I want you to tell your version of who the Anunnaki are and how they got here. You do it. It's just really well done. So I'm just going to throw it.
You want the slick version, right?
Yeah, just go for it.
We'll make it flow and stop me if I leave anything out.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Who are the Anunnaki?
Okay. All right. Well, by looking at the Sumerian tablets, we get an indication from these people they were visited by someone from another planet. They served them as slaves, and they had no problem with that. So who were the Anunnaki? According to the records, about 450,000 years ago, they had some atmospheric problems on Nibiru. They were caught in an orbit that they didn't originally exist in their Enumilish creation account. And so they were in a retrograde orbit around our sun, and each time they came close perihelion, basically their atmosphere was suffering. So they were looking for a solution, much like we are right now, to shield CMEs and radiation from the sun as it's peaking in its cycle. So similarly, they had a problem. So 450,000 years ago, according to their record, they sent their premier scientists to the Earth, which they were observing. They're in retrograde orbit, so they're seeing all the planets as if they're on a mobile observatory. Okay, so they probably had very good records about what planets had what, especially resources that they were interested in. They left the planet. Enki took approximately 50 GG, these are subservient workers, from Nibiru to the Earth. He landed in the Persian Gulf, and he actually was planning to verify one of his precursors that had actually been sent there on exile. I'm not going to go into that. His name was Alalu. And he verified there was gold and had planned to mine it from the Persian Gulf, out of the waters, both monoatomic and colloidal. So from that point, his workers and he set up the first city called Eridu, Eridu. And in my new book, I could give a couple of Google Earth images of the city and a map of the temple district, which is very interesting. Okay, so he's here. He's trying to get gold. And apparently, they've been working for more than a shar being the orbital period of their planet, which is 3,600 years. And they've been working longer than that, and then still weren't making the progress that was expected of them. Imagine how much gold you would need to ionize and put in an atmosphere to shield, depending on how big your planet is. So, in my mind, this was a losing battle ultimately, but they're going for it. Okay, so Enki's trying to get gold. He's not getting it fast enough in the Persian Gulf. His father, Anu, the one that sent him, redirected him to the mines in South Africa. And now this is circa probably 445,000 years ago, because right at that point, his half-brother was dispatched from Nibiru to come to the Earth. His name was Enlil. Okay, and I have to explain these two characters a little bit, so we got the names pegged down. Enki is the scientist. Enlil is the bureaucrat, and he's a military-type commander. He earns the title Lord of the Command, whereas Enki used to have Lord of the Earth. That's what he has when he was first here. Then he got kind of demoted to Lord of the Sea. So those guys were fighting over titles from 445,000 years ago on this planet. Okay, so Enki vectored off to Africa. Enlil came down. Anu also joined them, and they cast lots to decide who was going to do what. Anu ended up going back to Nibiru. Enlil got the Mesopotamian region where their bond heaven Earth was going to be set up. Their mission control centers was later established at the city of Nippur. Their landing site for their aircraft was at Sapar. And Shuruppak was their medical center, where another character that's going to show up here pretty quick, Ninhartsog, who's also known as Isis, had her medical center there. And it also turns out to be the headquarters for the king of Shuruppak, who we know as Noah. We'll get to him.
Okay.
They're trying to get gold in Africa. They've been now we're going to jump over into the Atrahasis. They've been working in the mines for many, many shard. It turns out almost 268,000 years went by my math, and I did this in my new book.
Now, a shar is their year.
Is 3,600 Earth years.
But it's 1 year to them.
It's 1 year to them.
Okay.
Now, this is the same number that shows up in the Sumerian Kings list as they counted their rulership in shars. Very, very interesting. Okay.
We'll
we're
get
down at the mines.
We'll get
These
back.
These guys are I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said we'll get back to that in a second. I just wanted to ask really quick for the chronology here. Mm-hmm. Enki, how old was he? I mean, how long did he live for, I should say?
Well, if we knew exactly when the cosmogony account specified by them in the Enuma Elish, when that celestial battle took place where their planet struck Tiamat and created the Earth and our moon. Right. If we knew exactly when that was, then we could probably answer that question.
Because we're looking at...
He's mentioned in that account, okay? He's one of the key players in the account. And so is his son, who's called Mumu, who's called Ningshita, who's called Thoth. Okay, so he's in that account too. What I'm going to tell you, based on what I know right now about their ages, these beings are immortal. Period.
Gotcha.
They can reincarnate in any body they want, in any dimension they want, and they're truly immortal. So when you see these lifespans in the Sumerian Kings list,
right,
the longest one was over 42,000 years.
Yeah, 28,000
by himself.
Yeah, 28,000 years, 30,000 years, 40,000 years.
Well, then you go down to Bad Tiberia. He served 12 shars. And 12, whereas the other one was only 8 shars.
Yeah, so that's 48. That's over 48,000 years.
Exactly. So when you start looking at that, you go, well, how long did they live? They served that long. Well, they tell you they're immortal. They don't die. Their energy doesn't need a body to exist. And we're going to go deep in that tonight, okay?
Yeah, we're going to go deep into that.
You want to go back to the mine in Africa?
Yeah, that's great minds think alike.
So the Gigi are down there busting their butt, for hundreds of thousands of years. And we know this. We found the mines. The Anglo-American Mining Corporation owns them. Okay, you can go look it up. And they finally had enough, and one of their fellow gods riles them up, tells them to burn all their tools and revolt. And his name was Allah. And he had another name. I'll go ahead and give it to you now. His other name is Nanar Sin. And he's Enlil's, the commander's son. He takes this Gigi lot. I mean, they've got weapons. They're very angry. And in the account, they surround Enlil's house at night. And Enlil goes, he's like, well, what am I going to do? He summons Enki, a couple other beings off this Anunnaki council. There's 12 of them that run everything, 6 males and 6 females. So we've only mentioned a couple, Anu, Enki, Enlil. Now we've got Allah, who is Nanar Sin. He's actually on the council as well. Okay. He leads these Gigi workers to his dad's house and demands relief. These guys are brutalized. They've been working day and night. They need relief. That's what he asked. Okay, so Enlil summons his father and Enki and a few other the members of the council and says, what do I do with this rabble-rouser? Okay, so he sends his gate guard, Nusku, out to go find out what their terms are. And they basically said, we're not doing this anymore. Find us a replacement. At that point, we start to glean some of the character attributes of these players. Anu says, well, looks like they've been overworked. And Enki says, it looks like they've been overworked. And Enlil says, well, I'll kill one and let's get them back to work. That kind of guy. Brutal taskmaster, okay? So at that point, Anu and Enki overrule him. He puts on a fake cry routine, and they decide to have a council meeting and discuss, whether we're going to replace them with tools or we're going to replace them with more meat, okay? So I go into intricate detail on the thinking between a machine and a meat host or a primitive worker. Now, recall, they were using meat before with the Ajiji. They've been doing this for 268,000 years, and they didn't bring in tools then.
Right.
So they preferred meat, okay? So I just want to put a fork in that.
Right.
They revolt, and at that point, Enki chimes up during the council meeting and says, hey, there's some bipedal hominids down here on the steppes of Africa. Let me give them my mark, and we'll upgrade them to be a primitive worker to replace the Ajiji.
Hence,
they bandied it around and decided that was the best solution. So he and his half-sister, Nin Hartsog, who was Isis in Egypt, were sent off to a lab in South Africa called the House of Shimti, where he essentially messed around with all kinds of chimeric trials to see if he could produce a sentient primitive worker who could follow their commands. Ultimately, he ended up using his own DNA with what appears to be a Neanderthal ovum, and they did in vitro fertilization into his half-sister with that zygote, who was in Hartsog. She carried the baby to full term, and in their account, they called it the Adamu or the Adapa, okay?
I'm with you.
From that point, they had a problem. When you take a jack and you mix it with a horse, you get a mule, and it's impotent. That's what happened to them. They ended up with a workforce, this first one, that could not procreate. And maybe it was by design until they determined that its efficacy was what they wanted. Well, ultimately, this became an issue because the Ajiji are still in the mines, and they're really upset. They want relief. And I don't think these trials happened overnight. I actually allocated in my book an entire shar for them to come up with this. Okay, it could have been shorter. So at that point, they finally succeed, produce the first offspring. He can't procreate. They also produce a mate for him. And at that point, neither of them have the right genetic construct. Well, this is where the next player comes in, the second DNA creation, the junior Dr. Frankenstein, okay? And this was Ningshita, and he's the one that shows up in the Enuma Elish. They called him Mumu, And in the Adapatale, he's called Gazida. Well, his real name's Ningshida, okay? So he looks at the DNA in this lab, discovers that there's a problem with not enough chromosomes. The Anunnaki had a superset of the DNA, well, what they gave to us. He ended up splicing the second chromosome and fixed the problem, okay? And you can see that in our DNA today. They were able then to procreate. They were escorted up to Eridu, back at Enki's first city, and they were going to be watched to determine whether this genetic upgrade was sufficient. Okay, so they got a labor force to meet, and they probably got Gantt charts and resources and names next to them that don't exist yet. Okay, so there's a sense of urgency here. At that point, Enki and Enlil now owning the Mesopotamian region, but not Eridu. It still belongs to Enki. That's where his temple was. So they're there watching the primitive workers in the garden. And this is where the Old Testament version in Genesis 1:26 comes out. Let us in our image and our likeness create man. Well, this is a plural statement. Now you realize there was a council of 12 involved, not one being who wrote the rest out of the account and made himself God.
Right.
Okay. All right. Let's keep that in mind.
Yeah, let's keep that. Let me stop you there for a second, because you raise an interesting point. I'm not an expert on the Bible, but when you say when the Bible states, and I want to make this clear, the Bible says us, not me. Right?
Yeah.
And I find
this is a problem for Zechariah Sitchin, von Däniken. They both looked at that and said, wait. And of course, then very shortly after there, it starts talking about these Elohim or Nephilim.
Right.
So all of a sudden, the us, and there's another plural term, and you just connect the dots. You shouldn't even be able to get out of Genesis without scratching your head bald.
Oh, yeah, you heard the email. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, because it's saying us as a race. It's not saying me as an individual creator, and I find that very interesting.
Even more specifically, if you read the Atrahasis account, the first tablet, the us is the members that were there that made the decision while the Ajiji were surrounding Enlil's fort. Okay, their names are named in there. They weren't all there. There weren't 12, according to the record. Ninhartsog, who was called Ninma, or Belit Ili, she was there. Enki was there. Anu was there. Enlil was there. And then their gate guard, for sure, Nusku was there. And I think Ninurta was there. So I got to go back and look. But they were there.
What about, now we're going to jump ahead and we need to come back to this. But in the Lost Book of Enki, all of that information came off of one tablet, didn't it?
Well, I've been poking around because, that was the only book that Sitchin ever left us that had no reference. And I thought that was an intentional thing he did there. I think he was trying to hide his source.
Well, I always thought
snooping around.
Well,
I've been snooping around.
There
was a set of records found in Sapar, their old spaceport. And then when you read the Emerald tablets and realize how they got there, they had a chronicle listing of everything from Enki's perspective of what went down during this mining mission. And that's where I believe he got this account.
Well, I always thought, I assumed the reason why he didn't do footnotes is because he would have had the same footnote on every page. Right? That it came from only one tablet. That's what I thought the intention was.
Well, from my understanding, there was a series of tablets there. And they were preserved, they were fired, they were in a golden chest, and they were in chronologic order. So I don't think there was just one. But I think, and this is just me, and this is just a hypothesis, I think he was working with some agencies that were disclosing things to him. And he was not allowed to disclose that knowledge.
Oh,
I don't know.
Okay.
It's very similar to when you get into the Emerald tablets later, that Dorial got access to these real emerald tablets that were held in a pyramid, and just for a period he got to copy some of it and release it. It's very similar.
Yeah, have the I don't want to segue to the right or to the left right now, but
Well, we're in the Garden of
have
Eden.
have
We
the
got people hanging.
I know. Have do you think the Emerald tablets have you seen the official one? Have you seen any photographs? Have you seen any evidence?
I have.
I've heard
There's
all of the
actually-
descriptions, and
There's actually one that showed up in Europe. It was a summary version of the 13. Okay, not including the 2 supplemental. There's a total of 15 I give in the book.
right.
Okay, the two last ones were not supposed to be released until a much later time than the 1925, and we can talk about it.
Okay,
So-
Gerald, are you still getting an echo?
I am.
Okay, let's take a quick break. Unplug your microphone, plug it in. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back in 2 minutes.
Terrific. Thanks so much.
All right, that is Gerald Clark. He's with us tonight, Anunnaki of Nibiru, Mercury Rising, his new book. We will be back right after this. This is Fade to Black, only on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Stay with us, everybody.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal God on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is JimmyChurchRadio.com.
JJCR in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter
Shut
Radio
down.
Network.
And
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Tonight, Gerald Clark. Tomorrow night, Angela Smith. Wednesday, Stuart Swerdlow. Thursday, of course, open lines, Fader nights. All right, Gerald, you got your microphone fixed?
your team has destroyed a turret.
Gerald, you got your microphone fixed?
I do. How do you,
Don't make me
Okay.
nervous. All right, before the break, we were talking. I want to talk about Michael Tellinger for a second, because with his research, he's such a brilliant mind. I love the guy. But he has uncovered evidence of 100,000-year-old and older gold mines in South Africa, and that obviously predates metallurgy by my calculations 95,000 years. Okay, so
yeah, exactly.
I could be off plus or minus a couple thousand years, but there certainly wasn't any need for humans. I don't know why they would need gold 100,000 years ago, but the evidence of those mines is there, and now we've got major global mining corporations that have swooped in and claimed these mines. Is that right?
That's correct. One of the mines that Zechariah told us about, in mining companies that it was active in South Africa, was the Anglo-American Mining Corporation. And so I looked into them, and they actually had some documents on their website that I put in my first book, talking about when they carbon dated these mines that they purchased. Okay, there were thousands of them, not just one or two.
Right.
And some of them, they had talked about finding carbon inside the mine that was 60,000 years old. Then another one later on was close to 100,000 years old. So all of a sudden, this was when I was in my Anunnaki corroborating story mode. When I saw that, I asked myself, who could have been on this planet with the knowledge to mine or smelt it and be in advanced metallurgy? Who is that?
Well,
and I was stuck until
yes.
I got the Sumerian story. And they told us they were doing it. The Anunnaki were.
With when you look at, I hate to say it, but I'm going to do it right now. When you look at Göbekli Tepe and the evidence of metallurgy at Göbekli Tepe, which again is coming into that magic year of 10,500 BC, 11,500 BC, and Göbekli Tepe wasn't supposed to exist. and you look at the timing of Mesopotamia and the Sumerian text and the advance of humankind, which happened to be overnight. Suddenly, we have governments and farming and the wheel and fire and all of that stuff. Everything just happened overnight. There's a connection there, and it seems that as days move by us, that the Anunnaki accounts become more and more clear to us all, and it's something that needs to be discussed and explored now. I can't.
Yeah.
I think Zechariah, and this is what I want you to comment on. I think Zechariah came and went. In other words, his first books, I mean, he had 25, 30, 40, 50 million people on the planet listening and reading to his every word. And then the evidence kind of shifted the other way when Nibiru didn't show up and there was no evidence of a planet and so forth. Well, that's what we were being told, I should say. And so that kind of waned. But now,
was that between 76 and 83?
Yeah, exactly. Well, 83 was the first evidence,
yes.
so we'll come back to that. Good, you're good. You're good, Gerald. But now today, Zechariah's kind of feeling pretty good. You know, I wish he was here to enjoy this, because now with the discovery of the outer rings and what's going on in our own solar system, something feels a bit fishy here, and maybe, just maybe, Zechariah was right, at least maybe 90%.
You know, as far as this theory goes, all you needed was probably 2 or 3 hard pieces of evidence. Number one was the gold mines for me.
Right.
And we had the written records. Okay, it wasn't some speculation from some artifact that we found. I mean, we had lots and lots of text to decode. And then ask yourself, is it true or are they lying? That's where you were at. It was so unbelievable. And everybody probably experiences that when they see this story and realize they were created as a primitive worker to replace another primitive worker. So I wanted to touch on a little bit of a timeline. We know that our last ice age ended at about 10,000 BCE, so no, about 12,000 years ago. Well, the Göbekli Tepe is about 12,000 years old. And I was traveling back and forth to Turkey, and I was focused on a city that Jared Diamond told us about, which was Catalhaya, an obsidian trading center, which was purported to be 9,000 years old. So how is it that Mesopotamia at supposedly 3,800 BCE and Egypt at 3,100 BC, how do they fit in to Göbekli Tepe? Well, if you go back to the Egyptian priest of the city of Sais, he described multiple floods in the Mesopotamian region, 4 major ones and several minor ones.
Right.
So what I'm telling you is those pre-diluvial cities in Mesopotamia, Bad Tabira, Sippar, Nippur, Uruk, Ur, those ones.
Right.
Ur, yeah, definitely Ur.
Yeah.
So Ur and Nippur were very, very closely coupled. Ur was the capital of Samaria twice, and Enlil's son, Nanar, was the king of Ur in the 2nd dynasty. Okay, I included a lamentation of Ur, including this conversation between Allah, Nanar, Sin, and his father, Enlil, Yahweh. Okay, so very, very important document. If anybody has any question about the relationship between Allah and Yahweh, it's right there in black and white. Lamentation of Ur. Okay, so once the floods came, in Noah's flood, and we got to get there from the Ajiji miners back where we are, actually from the Garden of Eden forward to Mount Ararat. We got to get there.
Okay.
Okay, so we know that the last ice age, there were earth perturbations, and it looks like that's when whatever this Noah story happened, and it landed him on Mount Ararat. Okay, so we can backtrack using the Sumerian kings list, because after the first Sumerian kings, which there were 8 or 9 of them, it ended after 176,500 years with the last one and of Noah's flood. That's what it says it right on the tablet. So you got a time marker right there. It's really, really helpful. So from that standpoint, this flood hit Mesopotamia. It wiped out everything. And these cities that were there were pre-diluvial, before 12,000 years ago. Actually, they go way back. Eridu was the first city on this planet built 450,000 years ago. And they built on top of it and on top of it, just like most ancient cultures do.
Right.
So the fact that they're saying it's 3,800 BCE, well, that was the last resurgence following the last flood. Okay. Well, before that, let's go back to the Garden of Eden, find out what happened there, fast forward with this flood, and then land on Ararat, and we'll see how Göbekli Tepe fits in if you want.
Exactly, and let's do that. And the funny thing is, when you start to put the pins in the map, when you're looking at Ararat, you're looking at Turkey, you're looking at Göbekli Tepe, you're looking at Karahunj in Armenia, and all of these cultures are kicking off right at the same time in the very same part of the earth. And none of this is coincidence. You cannot explain it away. So let's go back to the Garden of Eden, and the way that you present this is an eye opener. I'm already scratching my head. I've got a bald spot right here in the back.
I want to say the symbolism gives the whole story away.
It does.
Okay, so we're in the Genesis account. We end up in the Garden of Eden, and there's the Adam and the Eve, and they're naked, right? Well, they're there because they've had a genetic upgrade by Ningshita. And Enki, the scientist who created them, with his DNA, is there with his half-brother, the commander, who's calling himself God already. Now, he's already written everybody out of the account. Now he's got to demonize Enki, right? So it's Enki's medicinal garden in Eridu. He's been here for thousands of years. He's probably got every medicinal type plant from the Amazon, from the desert, all over the planet in his seed bank there in Eridu. Okay? So he's got these two primitive workers. They bring him up to see if they can procreate. And at that point in the story, in order to lambaste the primitive workers, Enlil tells them, you can partake of anything in the garden, but don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And otherwise you will surely die. That's what it says, right? And Enki, the snake, the snake represents the double helix of the caduceus. The two snakes winding around a vertical pole, ending up two wings coming out of the side with a little knob on top. That was the sign for a geneticist, okay? Anyway, so then he gets referred to as the snake. So the snake in the garden says, no, if you eat, you'll become aware. Your consciousness will be changed, and you'll know the difference between good and evil like we do. So what did he do? He gave them a free will choice to either kowtow to Enlil or listen to Enki. Well, they chose to listen to Enki, and they didn't die. They woke up, and exactly what he said happened. They had a consciousness-changing experience. And then the rest, the throwing them out of the garden, all that, and because the original sin. Well, the reality was, Enlil wanted them as primitive workers. Look how he treated them in the Atrahasis account, down in the mines. He didn't want them to wake up and become one of their staff members. Give me a break.
Right.
They're primitive workers, and keep them down there. I don't care if they have clothes or not, but as long as they're getting the job done and they're on this side of the bell curve, good to go. Okay. So at that point, Enki intercedes with the Adapa, puts him in his temple in Eridu, trains him in everything he knows. And there's actually an account in there we can skip if you want, where he actually gets taken to meet Anu up on Nibiru in order to evaluate this primitive worker and kind of see what his genetic construct is and see what the constraints were that Enki established for this being. So I'm going to leave that one for the book, okay, because it kind of takes us off track.
Okay.
So now we're about to have a problem. After 600 years of this primitive breeding work for programming, the Anunnaki were successful at getting their labor force replaced. And now our progenitors, yours and mine, are in the mines piling out